When I was in Jiangyan, I once risked my life to save a nobleman. He remembered my face. When he came to propose marriage, he mistook my elder sister, who looked like me, for the one he sought. My stepmother forbade me from revealing the truth. Even if you were to speak the truth, do you really think the crown prince would marry a daughter born to a concubine? But my sister was ill, fated, and died of sickness before the wedding. My father, unwilling to lose such immense wealth and status, insisted that I take her place in the marriage. He assumed that because we looked alike, even as a mere substitute, I would surely be cherished by the crown prince. Unfortunately, that was not the case. He only resented that, since we looked so much alike, why was it her who had to die, and not you? He remained cold toward me throughout, and never believed the truth I told him. Reborn to the time when the crown prince first became betrothed, I knelt before my stepmother, and to avoid any further complications, "Mother, please settle my marriage arrangements as soon as possible." My stepmother was stunned for a moment. "Why have you suddenly brought this up? After all, just a few days ago, I had been stubborn and refused to give in." She had used my birth mother's life to threaten me, forcing me to recount how I had saved the crown prince back then. On a pleasure boat in Jiangnan, the crown prince was secretly investigating rebels. When he was caught off guard, the boat caught fire and sank, and he fell into the river. He drifted south with the current, and I was the one who pulled him ashore, caring for him meticulously for several days. When we parted, the young man said in a low, hoarse voice, "My mission this time is highly confidential, so I cannot reveal my true identity. Tell me your name, so that I may find you in the future." I said, "My name is Tao Xiao, and in a few days, I shall be heading to the capital to the Lu residence." At that time, my birth mother had fallen gravely ill. I must go and beg. That high-ranking biological father of mine, he remembered the peach blossoms floating on the water, the young man standing at the bow of the boat, gazing at me for a long time. "I will remember you, but this face of mine, my pampered elder sister also possesses." Only when he came to the house in person did I realize the person I saved was Crown Prince Pei Ling. After I hastily covered it up, my elder sister's cheeks flushed red and she coughed twice. I too am enamored with His Highness, but I didn't know which event he was referring to. "Who is Tao Xiao?" My stepmother's gaze shifted to me. She knew that Tao Tao was my childhood nickname. After I was recognized and added to the family register, I changed my name according to my generation. "It is you." She stroked my elder sister's loose hair. "From this day forward, your nickname shall be Tao Tao." I was coerced into revealing every single detail to her. Coincidentally, my sister was frail and had also spent 2 years recovering from illness away from home. Pei Ling heard her story and believed it without a shadow of a doubt. He then went to the emperor to request a marriage decree. Everything was perfectly in place, except for the fact that I was still there, ultimately a lingering threat. My stepmother came to her senses. "You are very sensible. I will find a good family for you and prepare a dowry. After you are married, take your mother and return to Jiangnan." I let out a long sigh of relief and softly replied, "Very well. My marriage must be settled as soon as possible. For one, as long as I remain in the capital, my stepmother cannot rest easy. And secondly, it was only a few months until my elder sister passed away. She had been frail since childhood, sensitive and prone to melancholy. Latter, she gave her whole heart to Pei Ling. The more attentive Pei Ling was to her, the more she suffered. She was also afraid of being exposed, living in constant anxiety every day. A bout of cold left her bedridden. After my elder sister passed away, Pei Ling was devastated for months. Father did not want to lose the crown prince as a son-in-law, and seeing that I resembled her, he pushed me forward. "Your Highness, you are so grief-stricken over your sister's death. You should go and comfort him. It would be a good thing to provide some solace for his longing." But he had miscalculated. Pei Ling believed I was deliberately imitating my sister with ulterior motives, and felt I was intentionally clinging to him, harboring ambitions to climb the social ladder. Over time, he grew to despise me intensely, even though he reluctantly agreed to marry me because of this face. There was not a shred of affection between us. On the night of our wedding, he lifted my red veil with the wedding scale. He studied me for a moment, then curled his lips in a sneer. "The wife I wanted to marry is already gone, yet you are still alive. Since we have such similar faces, why was it her who had to leave? Why couldn't it have been you?" He carelessly tossed the red veil aside and threw down the wedding scale. That night, he covered my eyes, forbidding me to look up at him and forbidding me to make a sound. After enduring months of cold treatment, I gathered the courage to ask him, "What if I told you that I was the one who saved you back then?" Taoxiao was my name too. The living can still confront the truth, but the one who died was already perfect in his heart. Moreover, that past event was 3 years ago, and I didn't remember it very clearly either. What I told him was no more distinct than what my sister had described. Pei Ling listened, his brow furrowed. He slammed his hand against the desk, documents scattered across the floor. His voice was chillingly cold. To rely on your slight resemblance to her, to gain status and glory, is one thing, but to steal the very thing she did, that is truly despicable. That day, I was punished by being made to kneel on the steps. A light rain drifted onto the roof tiles. People walked back and forth, but no one dared to look at the wretched crown princess. And no one dared to come over and hold an umbrella for me. I was soaked through to the bone. Collapsing helplessly in front of the hall, I felt a chill that seeped from my skin deep into my heart. I fell gravely ill because of this, and lost the child in my womb. When I woke, only my maid was by my bedside. She looked troubled, and gently informed me that because the anniversary of Ziyue's death was approaching, no one in the Eastern Palace dared to risk the Crown Prince's displeasure. Even the eunuch who tried to report it was driven away. His Highness still does not know. I lay facing away from the window, tears streaming down my cheeks onto my collar. I regretted it so deeply. If I could go back a few years, I would rather have never met him. If several months ago I hadn't married him, my stepmother had given me several portraits of young men, all of them talented and virtuous, and some even held official degrees. It was just that they weren't officials in the capital, or were about to be posted to remote assignments. She truly wanted to find me a good husband. Not just because I knew my place, but also because she still needed to rely on me for my elder sister's sake. What exactly did you do with him that day? Her face was bloodless, and a faint scent of medicine clung to her body. Yet, whenever Pei Ling was mentioned, her eyes still sparkled. I tried my best to recall. My birth mother was critically ill, and we were in dire financial straits. I could only brew him some plain porridge. He laughed and said it had no flavor. I was young and headstrong then. I flushed red with embarrassment. When one is ill, one naturally prefers lighter fare. The tea wasn't of good quality either. There was only some old Longjing tea left. He wasn't used to the taste. I complained that he was too delicate. She noted down every single detail. Oh, then I will say this. Back then, the nanny thought I knew nothing. She embezzled money and grain and treated me shabbily, which is why life was so difficult. She fabricated a story with no loopholes. Every event had a reasonable explanation. But it wasn't the truth. When pieced together, it was full of holes. I couldn't be bothered to think about it anymore. In my previous life, that was exactly how she successfully deceived Pei Ling. My elder sister listened to it all. She asked me to take out the portraits of my potential suitors, so she could take a look as well. She took a few of them, showing no interest at all. These people, not even all of them combined, could compare to a fraction of His Highness. She raised her eyes to look at me, with a hint of scrutiny. Sister, are you content with this? My heart didn't stir in the slightest. I am content. His Highness is of royal blood. He is not someone I can covet. My elder sister smiled faintly. She casually pulled out a portrait and shoved it into my hand. Then go meet him tomorrow. If you take a liking to him, I can still see you married off before I leave the house. The person my elder sister picked for me was the second-place scholar of the imperial examination. He came from a respectable and noble family named Gu Zezhi. For some unknown reason, he would not be serving in the capital. It would not disgrace the Liu family's status, and it ensures I won't be able to return to the capital for 3 years. I pondered it for a while and agreed. My stepmother sent out the invitation, arranging for me to meet that runner up in private. High above the painted pavilion, thousands of willow branches cast a vibrant green hue. Once he took his seat, I removed my veil, and only then could I see clearly. Gu Zezhi was very handsome, with a dignified and upright demeanor, carrying a hint of cold reserve, making one dare not be disrespectful. A hand with distinct knuckles steadily pushed a teacup toward me. The Gu family has a house rule: no concubines for the men. After we marry, the farmlands and shops under my name will all be handed over for you to manage. If you need to care for your birth mother, you may bring her to live with us as well. My circumstances, it seemed he had known all along. However, I will soon be leaving the capital for an official post elsewhere. The wedding will be rushed, and I fear you may be wrong. He was a kind man. I thought it over and could find nothing to be dissatisfied with. The rushed marriage was actually perfect. I sipped the tea he poured, agreeing to every word. I also told him things my stepmother hadn't mentioned, such as the fact that I know a little medicine and that I enjoy tending to flowers and plants. As for things like embroidery, I am not very skilled at it. He looked at me and smiled gently. We chatted quite pleasantly. When we parted, he said he would send a matchmaker within 3 days. to prepare the 3 letters and 6 rites. As we were leaving, the downstairs area was bustling and noisy. I ran into Pei Ling, who was dressed in plain clothes. He did not seem to want to reveal his identity, so Gu Zezhi paused for a moment. I simply addressed him as Sir and exchanged a few polite words. Pei Ling was holding a food box, leaning against the railing, and let out a low laugh. My bride, to-be, loves the pastries from this shop. I came to buy them myself, so I can find an excuse later to go see her again. His voice was languid, tinged with teasing. And you? To think I'd live to see you meeting a young lady in secret. Is the happy day drawing near? Yes, though we will likely return to Yangzhou for the wedding. I won't be able to invite you to the wedding feast. Yangzhou. Pei Ling repeated the name. That is a fine place. That was where I first met him. By the riverbank, I saved a man's life and regretted it for half my life. I clenched my palms, thankful that I had kept my veil securely fastened. His gaze cut through the crowd, rested on me for a moment, and then drifted away indifferently. Which young lady are you betrothed to? She looks somewhat familiar. I must know her. I just can't place her at the moment. If Prime Minister Liu were to marry off his daughter, the whole capital would know before long. My family background is obvious. There is no need to hide it. Gu Zezhi replied casually. The Liu household of the capital. As soon as the words were spoken, the surroundings seemed to fall silent. Pei Ling froze, lost in a moment of daze. In Yangzhou, when he asked me which family I belonged to, I had answered the same way, the Liu household of the capital. By the time I returned to the manor, the sky had already dimmed. My stepmother asked how the meeting with the gentleman had gone. Her eyes fell upon my face, and her stern expression softened with a rare touch of warmth. You look just like my daughter. I don't wish to see you suffer either, but no matter what, the best marriage must be reserved for her. A top scholar from a respectable family is a match for you. You should be content with that, shouldn't you? If we were back in Jiangnan, you wouldn't find such a good match. I lowered my head and answered softly, yes, he is a good man. Thank you, mother. Her expression softened. Go back and rest. To return to my small courtyard, I had to walk through the veranda, passing the reception hall. I had only taken a few steps when someone behind me suddenly called out, wait a moment. My stepmother pointed toward another path. Your sister is meeting with the crown prince. You should take a detour. I took another, much quieter path. The sun was gradually setting, casting the dying light across the lotus pond. I leaned over by the pond to look, my reflection in the water rippling as the wind brushed by. In truth, it is not that my sister and I are indistinguishable. We only share a 7/10 resemblance. But 2 years have passed, and living in the Prime Minister's residence, well-fed and well-clothed, my health has recovered, and I have blossomed. She, however, remains frail and delicate due to illness, looking more like I did 2 years ago. That he cannot tell us apart now is only natural. I let out a soft sigh when I suddenly heard voices from behind the wall. It was Pei Ling walking in the courtyard with my sister. He asked, as if in passing, you never mentioned to me that you had a sister of similar age. My sister paused, her tone stiffening slightly. I was recovering from illness in Jiangnan, and I wasn't close with the sisters in the household. There wasn't much to speak of. Pei Ling neither agreed nor denied it. He just smiled lightly, as if teasing her. Today's tea is much easier to drink than what you brewed back then. My elder sister felt shy, her voice dropping low. I didn't understand back then and was deceived by others, stuck only with that Mingho Longjing tea. Her words were seamless and airtight. I didn't want to hear any more, so I lowered my head to watch my step and quietly walked away. After nightfall, the lamps were lit in the manor. Pei Ling had long since departed. I served mother, helping her drink her medicine, and then tucked her into bed. Due to her illness, she hasn't managed affairs for a long time, but the crown prince proposing to his savior is such big news that she was bound to hear of it. Her eyes turned red. Tao Tao, is my illness holding you back? You were the one who saved him. The current was so strong back then. You were the only one brave enough to jump in to save him. It left me terrified for days. I comforted her, telling her not to worry, that I wasn't being held back. In my past life, I knew my status wasn't enough, and there were layers of obstacles, so I dismissed the idea of revealing my identity to him. He wasn't the only person I had ever saved, and I never harbored delusions of rising to power through a debt of gratitude. Latter, although I knew he loved deeply, I also understood he would seek a replacement and would speak cruelly to innocent people. He was never a good man to begin with, so there is nothing to regret. I am also getting engaged soon. I have inquired about that family. Their reputation is spotless, and they left official posts in the capital only because they spoke the truth for the people. He is an excellent man, and regardless of whether there is deep affection, he will never treat me poorly. I picked up the medicine bowl, looked up, and gave her a smile. Soon, we will be leaving the capital. The next day, the Gu family arrived, as promised, to propose marriage. The matchmaker for the groom was the highly respected Grand Tutor. I have no idea how Gu Zezhi managed to invite him. He clearly holds this matter in high regard. My stepmother and father were both extremely satisfied. My wedding date was set for the very next auspicious day. Despite the hurried pace, every ritual was strictly observed. In 10 days, I will don my bridal attire and leave the capital with him. My wedding gown was already being rushed by the estate's embroiderers. I only needed to embroider the bridal veil myself, working on it stitch by stitch. My state of mind is completely different from my previous life. Back then, I was filled only with anxiety, because every time Pei Ling saw me before our wedding, his expression was always terrible. During the flower festival, it poured with rain, and he abandoned me there. The pastries I made, he discarded like trash. My father, seeing which way the wind blew, told me not to keep throwing myself at him. Forget it. I had wanted to win the crown prince's favor, but instead, I only earned his annoyance. It was counterproductive. He asked my stepmother to find someone else for me. Since I was already the legitimate daughter, if I didn't marry the crown prince, I would still marry into a noble house. So I attended many banquets and met several young men from noble families. But in full view of everyone, the aloof and noble crown prince, his expression suddenly turned incredibly sinister. He grabbed my wrist and dragged me behind the rockery. I have agreed to marry you. I will not allow you to marry anyone else while wearing that face. I had become my own replacement, living in humiliation and loneliness. Thankfully, days like those will never happen again. Before leaving the house, Gu Zezhi also sent me many things. They were all small items not listed in the betrothal gifts. Sometimes it was a medical classic. Sometimes it was a floral hairpin. My preferences, he keeps every single one of them in his heart. The medical texts are rare editions, so obtaining them must have taken quite some effort. When I asked about it, he refused to say much. We are an engaged couple. As long as these things can bring you joy, then all the effort spent is worth it. Even my elder sister was somewhat envious, seeing me water the flower seedlings while holding a hand warmer. Her tone was incredibly despondent. Such devotion. His Highness has never spent such effort on me. Never. In this life, he remembers her preferences. In the previous life, after she passed away, Pei Ling was devastated for a long time. He wore mourning clothes for several months and made an exception to have her buried with the honors of a princess. Regardless of how you look at it, that counts as a form of partiality. I don't even have a sweet tooth, yet he sends sweets every single day. I don't like the color green, but when the palace bestows silk robes, they only ever give me that color. I rarely get the chance to go out to pick out jewelry with him in person. He only ever chooses gold hairpins for me. She spoke with agitation, her tone growing increasingly emotional, her eyes slowly turning red. She lowered her head and coughed for quite a while, speaking in broken fragments, barely able to string a sentence together. Tell me, you only spent 3 days with him. Can 3 days of companionship really be that unforgettable? At a time like this, saying too much would surely be a mistake. I remained silent for a moment, only saying, "You admire the crown prince, no matter what. You have finally gotten your wish." Yes, she tugged at the corners of her mouth, but her eyes did not look truly satisfied. Even if I have to pretend for the rest of my life, I am going to be the crown princess. 3 days before the wedding, someone sent me an invitation, asking to meet one last time. I had been in the capital for 2 years and had a few close friends I would be parted from for many years, so I couldn't bear to refuse. In the end, I accepted. We went boating on the lake, sipping tea and chatting about everything under the sun. Just as the boat was about to dock, a friend looked up, gazing into the distance with a look of surprise. Only then did I notice that in the painted pavilion on the shore, someone was looking down at us. The young man beside him nudged Gu Zezhi. "Zezhi, that appears to be your bride-to-be," Pei Ling said in a muffled tone. "He and the Lu household have kept her hidden so well. How is it that all of you recognize her?" Gu Zezhi offered a faint smile, raising his hand to close the window. "It is her. Let's not disturb her." Someone else chimed in. "The Lu household hasn't been hiding her at all. She is the second daughter, raised in the south, and only arrived in the capital 2 years ago. His Highness was busy with state affairs before, so he didn't recognize her. But we have all seen her. Come to think of it, she looks quite a bit like her older sister. Back then, everyone assumed they were full sisters." How much do they look alike? 70 or 80%, I'd say. Neither of them like to go out much. At first, those with poor eyesight couldn't tell them apart. and could only identify them by their dresses. I remember the eldest daughter wore moon, white, and the second daughter wore jade, green. A hand reached out and pulled the carved wooden window shut, cutting off the faint, indistinct sounds from within. I straightened my veil and boarded the carriage, my palms slick with a thin layer of sweat. After bidding farewell to my friends that day, the invitations to the Lu residence have suddenly increased. They are all for me. Some are from mere acquaintances. Others are from prominent noblewomen. There are even members of the imperial clan who once spoke ill of my status as an illegitimate daughter, county princess. My stepmother would put on a polite smile and turn them away for me. It wasn't that we lacked manners, but with the wedding so close, we truly had no time to spare. Fortunately, time was very tight. On the day of the grand wedding, Gu Zezhi wore his wedding robes to receive me. Crowds gathered to watch. No one expected Pei Ling to be among them. His expression was heavy and somber. You and I met 2 years ago in Yangzhou. Back then, I had a sweetheart. I told you that when I married her one day, I would certainly invite you to the wedding feast. You also promised that you would invite me to yours. You are about to be sent away from the capital. I won't be able to drink the wine, letting me catch a glimpse of the bride's face should not be too much to ask. Others simply assumed the crown prince was teasing. Children on the street began shouting, "Let's see the bride. See the bride." Before getting into the bridal sedan, I let people catch a distant glimpse through my veil. That would not be improper, but Pei Ling said, "Take off the veil." His words were drowned out by the wedding music, yet those near the mirror heard him clearly. No one expected him to press so aggressively. Losing all sense of propriety, Gu Zezhi's voice turned cold. "Your Highness, this is my wife. I will not tolerate such humiliation." I bit my lower lip. In my peripheral vision, I caught a glimpse of my elder sister's jade, green skirt. "Your Highness," she said with a hint of annoyance. She didn't even use her usual soft, gentle tone when she spoke. On such a joyous day, "Please, don't make things difficult for my younger sister." Since she had spoken up, Pei Ling remained silent for a long time before finally lowering his head. It was my lack of decorum. After the wedding ceremony was concluded, I left the capital with Gu Zezhi. We traveled by boat to Yangzhou, where he was to take up his post. When he first took office, he was swamped with official duties, often spending his nights at the government office. Our wedding night was only truly fulfilled nearly 2 months after we were wed. By then, he and I were quite familiar with each other. We ate and lived together, sleeping side by side at night, and going out for spring outings during his time off. Sometimes, when passing things to one another, if our hands accidentally brushed, I would find myself blushing for no reason. Gu Zezhi carefully used the wedding scale to lift the veil. My face was flushed, illuminated by the dragon and phoenix candles. My husband's voice was warm and gentle, tinged with a smile. "In private, what shall I call you from now on?" I was stunned. My given name, Lu Yunpei, had been used for 2 years, and I was not fond of it. My mother had given me a beautiful name, Tao Xiao, meaning far and clear. Far, far away is the cowherd star. It was a name filled with longing and affection. Unfortunately, I could not use it while in the capital. My throat felt a little dry. How about calling me Tao Xiao? He set down the wedding scale and took up the thread of conversation. I was taken aback. In a daze, I agreed. That night was exceptionally long. We talked about so many things, and so I learned that we were meant to have known each other. The first time, his younger brother was being mischievous and accidentally lost an heirloom belonging to the Queen Mother. It just so happened that I was the one who found it. The second time, when Pei Ling's incident occurred, he accompanied his father to provide support and stepped into my small courtyard for the first time. It's just that I never really noticed him before. Back when I was in a rush to arrange a marriage, fate brought us back together at just the right moment. I was living quite comfortably in Yangzhou. It was a hometown I had been familiar with since I was a child, with money and access to skilled physicians, seeing me happy every day. My mother was also in good spirits. Her illness slowly began to recover. That was when the change occurred. I received a letter from the capital. It was written by my stepmother. Pei Ling had finally become suspicious. He invited my elder sister to go view the lotus flowers by the shores of Taiye Pond. Pei Ling was suddenly called away by the empress, leaving behind my sister and the 7th prince, who insisted on following them. The 7th prince was Pei Ling's younger brother by the same mother. Being mischievous in his youth, he chased a dragonfly and fell into the middle of the pond. He splashed about, calling for help. My sister was completely at a loss. She was so terrified, she broke into a cold sweat. She stood frozen for a long while before lifting her skirt to call for help. However, after the workers who knew how to swim arrived, the 7th prince stopped struggling He climbed out of the water with ease and agility. She understood. Pei Ling was testing her. She only said, "It is not that I did not want to save him, but my health has worsened in recent years. The imperial physician warned me that I cannot touch even a bit of cold water." Pei Ling sneered, not believing her at all. When I first met her, the snow in Jiangnian had just melted, and the water was rushing fast. It wasn't just a matter of getting a little cold. She didn't even hesitate to think, and jumped straight in. His words were so cold and decisive, showing no mercy. She knew in her heart that there was no possibility of turning things around. Her shoulders trembled, and tears fell like rain. It was already flawless. "Why did you decide to test me?" Pei Ling closed his eyes. His expression was gloomy, as if feeling restless and stifled. "Because when I was with her, I only hoped the rescuers would come slower. Being with you, I do not feel any joy. My elder sister's engagement was broken. Her reputation was in ruins. After returning home, she fell gravely ill. She was determined to leave the capital to recover. My stepmother's thoughts were complicated. She wanted to blame me, but I had already done my best to help her. After all, the resentment. All that remained was blaming Pei Ling for his lack of tact. Even if he won't marry my daughter, could he not have been more considerate? The best thing I ever did was to marry you off early. I had no choice but to believe it. My mind was in a state of chaos. The next day, when I went to manage the shop myself, the shopkeeper reported, "Madam, a noble guest has arrived in the capital. They ordered a large shipment of goods and said they wish to meet with you. When the crown prince inspects Yangzhou from the capital, there should have been an imperial decree first, ordering officials to prepare the procession to receive him. But this time, there was none. Pei Ling came alone and arrived upstairs without a sound. The curtains were drawn low, blocking out the scorching sun outside. He had traveled all the way here, his face pale, his eyes dark and heavy. It was as if he wanted to interrogate me. But when he spoke, his voice was dry and hoarse. "Tao Tiao." He stared into my eyes, as if a lifetime had passed, yet he still remembered a lifetime. "Tao Tiao, you know that I am enamored with you. I want to marry you. Why are you avoiding me? And why did you tell Lu Yunyao all those trivial details? Helping her to deceive me?" I said, "I do not wish to marry you." His expression froze for a moment, as if he could not believe it. His eyes gradually turned red. "We spoke so happily in this very place back then. You clearly had feelings for me, too. I am the crown prince of this nation. Wealth and power. My deepest affection. I can give it all to you. What exactly is it that makes you so dissatisfied?" I knew that when my elder sister became his fiancée, everyone in the capital knew how much he valued her. But during the years, I was the crown princess. I received nothing at all. Everyone spoke to me with cold words, saying I had climbed the social ladder by stepping on my late sister. But by then, I had already let it all go. I had long since planned to be done with him, once and for all. It was he who insisted on marrying me, and he didn't even believe I had once saved his life. "I have no need for those things." I shook my head, my tone remaining calm. "I have no feelings for you. I do not wish to be involved with anything concerning you." He still could not understand how he had offended me to make me speak so harshly. His gaze slowly dimmed, a tear sliding down. His voice was low and hoarse, as if he wanted to say something, but I stopped him. I cut him off. "Your Highness, I am a married woman now. It is not appropriate for you to stay long." I did not want to speak with him further, so I turned and walked away. I could not sleep well all night. At times, I dreamt of Pei Ling treating me as coldly as he did in my past life, and at others, I saw myself lying alone on a sick bed. I woke up in a panic in the middle of the night. Gu Zezhi brushed the sweat, dampened hair from my temples, pulling me into his embrace. After a moment of silence, he asked softly, "Who did you see in your dreams today? To be so frightened in your sleep?" I pressed myself against his chest, not knowing how to begin. Before I could finish, a servant knocked on the door in a panic. "My lord, there has been an incident, a matter of life and death." Gu Zezhi threw on his clothes with great efficiency and gave my hand a gentle, reassuring squeeze. His voice was mild. "I shall return shortly. Have your maid come and keep you company." I couldn't sleep soundly anyway, so I simply lit a lamp and leaned against the bed to read. I waited the entire night. It wasn't until daytime that I heard the news. The crown prince was traveling incognito in Yangzhou, and for some unknown reason, he seemed utterly distraught. He drank heavily on a pleasure boat all night, while standing on the bow to catch the breeze. Being far too intoxicated, he fell into the river. Summoner jumped in to save him. Passersby saw his fine attire and realized he was a person of status. They reported it to the local officials, which alerted the prefect. The prefect was a former capital official who had met the crown prince before. He was so terrified, his soul nearly left his body. He summoned all the physicians and ordered the entire office to rise, preparing to receive the royal guest. The crown prince remained unconscious for 2 hours. Upon waking, he demanded to see Lord Gu. When he finally spoke, his tone was incredibly gloomy. He said only one thing: return her to me. This ambiguous statement no one around could decipher. Yet, Lord Gu's expression remained cold, and he replied with no sign of submission. She is not an object. She is a living person. How is one supposed to return her, and who has the right to do so? It wasn't until the sunset melted into gold that Gu Zezhi finally returned. He hadn't closed his eyes all night. Exhausted to the bone, he shut the doors and windows tight, rested his head on my lap, and closed his eyes. My heart was in a state of chaos as I asked the crown prince in a soft voice, "Did he give you any trouble?" "No." He rubbed against me ever so lightly, his palm pressed against my cheek, his voice carrying a hint of a sleepy nasal tone. He was so drunk, he lost his senses. He went on a rampage and spouted nonsense. I replied in a low murmur, I had heard rumors, but... Gu Zezhi opened his eyes, clutched my hand tightly, applying a slight pressure, his fingers interlocking with mine. It wasn't just that one thing that got out. His voice betrayed no emotion. He said you were once his crown princess. So after falling into the water, he also regained memories of his past life. My breathing stuttered for a moment, a tightness forming in my chest. Then he truly has lost his mind. Gu Zezhi chuckled softly. He was truly exhausted and fell back onto the couch to sleep for a while. He didn't get up until evening to draft official documents in the study. I didn't want to disturb him, so I had dinner by myself. The next day, the prefect's wife invited me to the yamen to admire the flowers. Everyone knew the crown prince was currently staying at the prefect's residence. I refused time and again, but the maid sent to invite me grew desperate. She couldn't stop her tears. "If you do not appear, madam, everyone in the entire residence will likely suffer for it." Pei Ling was never one to be reasoned with, and certainly not one to give up easily. It was time to make things clear. Let him give up on this idea. I closed my eyes. Fine, I will go. Tell him not to make things difficult for others. The crowds by the lotus pond had dispersed. It was so quiet that only the sound of the wind shaking the branches remained. I sat in the pavilion. I heard very light footsteps behind me. The hand that Tiao Xiao wanted to touch me with reached out, then pulled back again. The young man stood alone against the light of the sky, his figure looking desolate. "I have lived 2 lifetimes, and in both lifetimes, I have only ever loved you. But in my previous life, I was deceived. I didn't know that you were the one I had been searching for day and night. I just thought Tiao Xiao was already dead. How could I ever love someone else? How could I ever be good to someone else? I couldn't be good to you, because I was afraid of betraying Tao Tao. But at that time, I had no idea. I was afraid to love him, that he and the love of my life were the same person." I said softly, "I already told you." Pei Ling gave a mocking laugh. "It is just a pity I didn't believe you, because by then Lu Yunyao had already passed away. There was no proof left. I had no way to test if she could swim again. I only suspected you from the bottom of my heart that you were attempting to completely take her place." The wind rippled the surface of the pond. He paused. His voice was dry and hoarse. "Is it really just my fault alone? If I had known earlier that you were Tao Tao, no matter what, I would have come to beg. To marry you, I would have given you everything I had. We would have had a perfect life together. But you helped her to deceive me as well. The reason I believed her is because you told her everything. She learned to wear green like you and mimicked the way you spoke, recording the past between us. By the end, Pei Ling's tone grew increasingly agitated, nearly hoarse with desperation. Tao Tao, it is so unfair to treat me this way. I had no choice." I looked at him calmly. My mother was ill. I needed money and a skilled physician. My stepmother could provide all of that for me. The only condition was to let my stepsister take my place. The beginning of all this was when you first arrived and mistook the wrong person. I gave a small smile. All of the capital was saying that the crown prince was betrothed to his savior. Yet my own husband still recognized me. Pei Ling was struck dumb. His eyes were rimmed with red, stubborn to an extreme degree. "Now that I recognize it as you, I can give you everything. In our past life, when I wanted you, Zhangsu said, you were merely the daughter of a concubine. Unfit for a proper position, I defied everyone and married you anyway. Even now, as a woman remarried, that is no problem at all. I lowered my gaze to the lotus flowers in the pond, speaking slowly and clearly. You treated me so cruelly in our past life. That night, you forced me to kneel until I suffered a miscarriage was when I realized I had been carrying your child. If you still think of me as your savior, then stop taking your revenge on me like this. These words left Pei-Ling utterly devastated. A child, he seemed unable to stand. Stumbling back a step and bracing himself against a pavilion pillar, he was panicked to the extreme. I had no idea. He lifted his face, tears already rolling down his cheeks. His face was as pale as paper, filled with profound remorse. I stroked my still, flat belly, my voice growing soft. But in this life, he has been kind. A good father has come home. I had dinner at the prefect's office. Pei-Ling forced himself to sit at the table, his lips pale, eyes cast downward. In a moment of distraction, he accidentally knocked over his wine cup. Wine spilled all over him, and the shards of porcelain cut his fingertips. The prefect was thrown into a panic, and the table descended into chaos. After the lamps were lit that night, Gu Zezhi, who had been kept away all day, came to pick me up personally. He carried a lantern, his expression grim. He did not spare Pei-Ling a single glance. His strong hand slowly steadied me. I've come to take you home. I boarded the carriage and leaned lazily against his shoulder. He was clearly anxious himself. Remaining silent for a long time, he simply took off his cloak and draped it over me. As he leaned over to tie the strings for me, his eyes suddenly turned red. Do you still want me? Of course I do. I nestled into his arms, finding it somewhat amusing. He isn't worth a single strand of your hair. Gu Zezhi gave a firm, reassuring hum. Besides, my child cannot do without its father. He opened his mouth, as if his throat were blocked, unable to make a sound. When his fingers touched my pulse, he suddenly snapped back to reality. He didn't actually know anything about medicine. I said softly, it has only been a little over a month. I only realized it today when I felt faint in the carriage. I was held by him, ever so gently. His voice was filled with irrepressible joy. Tiao Tiao, I am so happy. I was taken care of perfectly while staying at the manor. Pei-Ling remained in Yangzhou for over 10 days. Sometimes we would go to the temple to light a lamp together. Sometimes we would spend the whole day copying scriptures. Sometimes, unable to sleep in the middle of the night, he would stand in the street, drenched in rain all night long. He soon fell ill. He kept the prefect so busy that he was at his wit's end, and he looked several years older. One day, the emperor, far away in the capital, issued a decree ordering the crown prince to return to the capital with all speed. Only then did I realize Gu Zezhi had submitted a memorial to the capital long ago. Before returning to the capital, Pei-Ling came to see me once to bring me some things. It was 10,000 taels of gold, and from his private treasury, rare treasures I had never seen in my previous life, and precious medicinal herbs. He was still thin from his illness, with no color in his face, and his lips pulled into a smile that looked more like weeping. This is to repay you for saving my life. I had indeed been short of money before, and I was quite greedy for wealth. I accepted this money with a clear conscience, and took it all. I only spoke a few words with him, and Pei-Ling left the capital. Not long after, an imperial decree arrived in Yangzhou from the capital. Because I had saved the crown prince, I was exceptionally granted the title of county lady instead of a formal rank of nobility. Gu Zezhi just smiled slightly. This is fine too. I will win back a formal title for you myself. I gave the precious herbs Pei-Ling had gifted me to my mother to take. A few months later, her illness was completely cured. She reopened her clinic, seeing patients just as she had before, never worrying about the cost. I would sometimes go to help out, working until the sun went down. When Gu Zezhi would stop by to pick me up after work, we would chat about this and that on the way home. Has the little one been giving you any trouble? No. He is very well behaved. It is time to give him a name. You, me, and your mother can each suggest one for his formal name, while we use your pet name. What do you think? I smiled and agreed. When news of Pei-Ling's passing reached Yangzhou, many years had already gone by after our engagement was called off. He never took another wife. He went north to quell rebellions and caught a plague while providing disaster relief. He died in the line of duty. The world mourned the crown prince, who loved his people like his own children. The entire nation went into mourning. In Yangzhou, all banquets and festivities were suspended for a long time. But in the blink of an eye, spring returned. My daughter is still very young, at an age where she is full of energy. Dressed in a little green dress, With seasonal wildflowers in her hair, she runs back and forth across the fields. She knows nothing of past lives or karma, unburdened by sorrow, with eyes clear and bright, just like a brand new tomorrow. The east wind blows the snow from the brow, and the night brings back the spring to the world.